Ebere took the small jar of rub from Titi, her face flushing as her fingers brushed Titi's for just a moment. She forced a small smile, feeling her heart race. "Are you sure you want me to do this?" she murmured, her voice trembling slightly. "Please," Titi replied, flashing her an easy smile, oblivious to the turmoil brewing within Ebere. "Just help me massage my back. It really hurts," she added, turning and walking toward her bedroom with an effortless grace, gesturing for Ebere to follow. Ebere swallowed, her palms damp with sweat, and silently willed herself to keep her composure. Each step felt heavier as she walked into the bedroom behind her. Titi settled on the bed, humming softly, the notes of a familiar Christian song floating through the air. She turned her head, smiling gently at Ebere over her shoulder. "You know I can't reach my zip," she said, almost laughing, as if it were a small joke. "Just unzip and apply the rub on my shoulders, please. Sorry for making you do this." It's it's no problem," Ebere managed to say, though her voice was barely more than a whisper. She fumbled with the zipper, her fingers trembling as she slowly slid it down, revealing the smooth line of Titi's back. She closed her eyes for a moment, stilling herself, and then dipped her finger into the cool menthol balm, smearing it on her palms. As Ebere began to rub the balm into Titi's shoulders, Titi let out a soft, contented sigh, sinking deeper into the bed. The gentle sound made Ebere's heart beat faster, and she struggled to keep her touch steady. But with every passing moment, the intimacy of it grew too much. Titi's relaxed murmurs, the way her body leaned into each stroke, it was overwhelming. Finally, Ebere pulled her hands back, her chest heaving. I I can't do this," she stammered, dropping onto the bed beside Titi, clutching her hands to her chest as she tried to steady her breathing. Titi pushed herself up, her eyes widening in concern. "Are you all right, Ebere?" she asked, reaching out gently and turning Ebere to face her. Ebere couldn't meet her gaze, the weight of her own emotions pressing down on her. But Titi's hand was warm on her shoulder, grounding her, and before she could second guess herself, Ebere looked up, her gaze lingering on Titi's face, on the curve of her lips, the softness of her expression. And then, suddenly, Ebere leaned forward, her lips meeting Titi's in a desperate fleeting kiss. It was barely a second, but it was everything she'd held back. Titi's eyes went wide, and she pulled back as though jolted by an electric shock. "Oh my God," she whispered, covering herself quickly, her cheeks flushed with a mixture of surprise and something else. Um, I'm sorry, Ebere." She stood up, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm married." The words crashed down on Ebere, each one hitting harder than the last. She felt her heart drop, her face burning with shame as the reality settled in. That evening, As the silence of her room engulfed her, Ebere buried her face in her pillow, stifling the sobs that tore at her chest. She had crossed a line she could never take back, revealing a part of herself she could never undo. And now, Titi knew. Titi and Ebere had stopped talking after the incident. The silence between them weighed heavily. Unspoken words suspended in the spaces they used to share. Titi had sent Ebere a message, brief and formal. Your clothes are ready. You can come pick them up. Ebere read it multiple times, her thumb hovering over the reply button. But in the end, she put her phone away, leaving the message unanswered. Titi, perhaps sensing her hesitation, didn't follow up. She let the silence stretch, neither pushing nor retreating. When they crossed paths in the school, there was an uncomfortable choreography between them. Ebere would feel Titi's gaze on her like a gentle pressure against her back, and she'd risk a glance over her shoulder. Sometimes, Titi would look as though she were about to speak, lips parting, eyes intent, but then she'd look away abruptly, her expression tightening as though she had thought better of it. The silence between them spoke louder than words, thick with unresolved tension and memories Ebere wished she could forget. But fear gnawed at Ebere, a constant whisper that kept her awake at night. Titi was married. What if in her frustration or confusion she confided in someone, her husband, or worse, a colleague in school? Ebere's heart pounded every time she imagined her secrets laid bare. The quiet judgments, the whispers behind her back. The risk was suffocating. For weeks, they maintained this uneasy distance. And then, one day, the school's power went out. The secondary school was plunged into darkness, and the generator had given up as well. Ebere groaned as she lay on her bed, swatting at the mosquitoes that buzzed around her. Her power bank was drained, and without her phone, she couldn't access any of her teaching materials. How would she explain to Mr. Isaac that she couldn't teach because her battery was dead? The thought made her sigh as she slapped a mosquito off her arm. She muttered irritably, "What kind of suffering is this?" Her roommate, Aisha, who taught biology, overheard as she folded her prayer mat and removed her hijab. "Where do you plan on charging your gadgets this evening?" she asked, an eyebrow raised in curiosity. Ebere sighed, exasperated. "I don't even know, Aisha. I'm just tired of this place." Aisha smiled, an idea flashing across her face. "What about Titi? Aren't you too close? We can go to her place outside school and charge. I need to charge too." Ebere's heart skipped. She quickly rolled her eyes to cover her unease. "I don't want to bother her," she mumbled, burying her face in her pillow, hoping Aisha would drop the idea. But Aisha only laughed. "See this one, no?" She reached for Ebere's phone and wiggled it teasingly in front of her. "Oh yeah, unlock it. I'll get her number from your phone and call her with mine if you want." Ebere groaned, but she knew better than to resist. Aisha always got her way. Reluctantly, she unlocked the phone and handed it over. Aisha grinned triumphantly as she searched for Titi's number and called with her own phone. When Titi picked up, her voice was warm, friendly. "Good evening, Madam Titi. This is Aisha." "Yes, Ebere's roommate. I was hoping I could come by and charge my gadgets. We are practically living in the dark here." "Oh, I'm actually at Zami's eatery in school," Titi replied, sounding pleasantly surprised. "I came to grab some dinner. You can meet me there in 5 minutes if you are free." Aisha's face lit up. "Perfect. I'll be there soon." She ended the call and looked at Ebere with a satisfied sigh. "That woman is so nice. Oh yeah, get up and wear something. Let's go." Ebere hesitated. Aisha rolled her eyes and pulled Ebere to her feet. "Abeg, don't overthink it. Your battery is on 3%. Let's go before it dies completely. It's already past 8, and we need to be back before they lock the gate by 11. Ebere swallowed her nerves and followed Aisha out of the room, her thoughts a swirling mess of fear and anticipation. Maybe with Aisha there, it would be easier to handle the tension. She could keep things casual, hold her emotions in check. At least, she hoped she could. As they approached Zami's eatery, under the dim glow of the moon, Ebere's heart beat faster. She caught sight of Titi stepping out, her gaze immediately finding Ebere's in the low, moody light. For a moment, neither of them moved, their eyes locked in a silent exchange that felt far too intimate. Aisha broke the spell, cheerfully calling out, "Good evening, Madam Titi. I'm the one that called." Ebere and Aisha sat in the sitting room, each engrossed in their conversation and the relief of charging their phones. Titi had already excused herself to the bedroom. "Let me go rest my head a bit. I've had a long day of classes," she had said, giving them a polite smile before disappearing down the hallway. "Let me know when it's 10:25 p.m. so I can drop you guys off, eh?" Aisha waved her off with a grateful smile. "Thank you so much, ma," she said warmly. Ebere, on the other hand, kept her eyes fixed on the phone, pretending to be preoccupied with her charger. The air between her and Titi still felt heavy, tense. It wasn't easy to ignore the memories that lingered in every corner of this house. Once Titi was out of sight, Aisha nudged Ebere, leaning close with a mischievous grin. "You've been here before, Abby?" Ebere's heart skipped a beat, heat spreading across her cheeks. "Eh?" she muttered, feigning confusion as she plugged her phone in more securely. Aisha chuckled. "You've been here before now. Me, I need to pee, Biko. Where is the toilet?" "Oh, oh." Ebere cleared her throat, pointing toward a door across the room. "The guest toilet is over there." "Thanks." Aisha got up quickly, rushing off toward the bathroom, leaving Ebere alone in the sitting room. Ebere sighed, glancing around the house. It all felt too familiar. Everything in its place, just as it had been the last time she was here. No wedding photos. She's married, but not a single photo of her and her husband. She murmured to herself, a twinge of bitterness in her voice. After a few minutes, a faint pressure began to build in her bladder, and she glanced at the door to the guest bathroom. Aisha had been gone a while. She went over and tapped on the door. "Aisha, what's up? I need to pee too." Inside, Aisha's laughter echoed. "Ah, I decided to poo at once, Biko. You know the toilet at the Copper's Lodge isn't good. I said let me use this opportunity well. Ebere groaned. She was getting desperate, but Aisha's voice only served to remind her of her predicament. The only other bathroom was in the bedroom. She hesitated, heart pounding, but finally decided to go for it. Taking a deep breath, she walked to the bedroom door and knocked softly. "Come in," Titi's voice called from inside. Ebere opened the door, stepping in hesitantly. Titi was lying on the bed, wrapped in a thin blanket. Her hair, tousled and eyes half lidded with drowsiness. Ebere swallowed hard, suddenly hyper-aware of her surroundings. "Is it 10:25 already?" Titi asked, her voice soft and gentle as she turned her head to look at Ebere. "No. Um, I need to use your bathroom, please. Aisha is occupied in the other one." Ebere's voice was barely a whisper. "Of course," Titi replied, her gaze lingering on Ebere's face for a moment longer than necessary. Ebere slipped into the bathroom, closing the door behind her. As she washed her hands, she took a moment to compose herself, calming her breathing and willing her heart to slow. When she finally opened the door, Titi was still lying on the bed, her eyes tracing Ebere as she moved to leave. "Baby girl, wait." Titi's voice stopped her in her tracks. She froze, one hand on the doorknob, feeling her heartbeat hammering in her ears. Slowly, she turned, her back still toward Titi. "Why are you avoiding me?" Titi asked quietly. "You don't even want your dress anymore." Ebere's hands clenched. She swallowed hard, her voice unsteady as she replied, I I just think it's better this way. You're a married straight woman. I don't want to make things complicated. And I hope you keep this between us." She forced the words out, her voice breaking slightly. Titi's expression softened as she stood, slowly crossing the room until she was standing right behind Ebere. "You're a very beautiful woman, baby girl," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ebere stiffened, her eyes shut tight as she whispered, "Can you not do that, please?" Instead of backing away, Titi gently took Ebere's hand, turning her so they were face to face. "You shouldn't assume you know everything about someone's preferences," she murmured, her eyes dark and intent as they locked with Ebere's. "Especially not with someone as beautiful as you." And before Ebere could process her words, Titi's hand lifted, her fingers grazing Ebere's cheek before she tilted her chin up, pressing her lips softly to Ebere's. For a second, Ebere's world spun, the room melting away as she surrendered, leaning into Titi's warmth. They kissed, the intensity building slowly, each touch igniting a spark. But just as the moment intensified, Aisha's voice rang out from the sitting room. Ebere, it's almost time. We need to get back. Titi pulled away, her breathing unsteady as she looked at Ebere, a faint smile on her lips. I'll drop you guys off at the lodge, she whispered. Ebere nodded, her gaze lingering on Titi, wanting to say more, but knowing she couldn't. She bit her lip, suppressing the urge to ask if she could stay the night. Instead, she simply nodded. Ebere lay in her bed that night, staring at her phone screen. It was at 72%, but sleep just wouldn't come. She tossed and turned, her mind racing as she kept glancing down, her fingers mindlessly scrolling. Why had Titi kissed her this time? Just a few weeks ago, Titi had firmly brushed her off, leaving Ebere feeling confused and rejected. But today had been different. Could Titi actually be interested? Or was it just some fleeting curiosity? A message notification popped up, interrupting her thoughts. She sighed, hoping it was Titi. But her heart sank slightly when she saw Ebuka's name instead. It had been days since they'd last spoken, ever since things started getting tangled with Titi. The message read, "You don't speak to me anymore." She stared at the notification without opening it, feeling a pang of guilt. A moment later, her phone started buzzing with Ebuka's incoming call. She watched it ring, her thumb hovering over the decline button. But eventually, she let it ring out on its own. Tonight, her mind was elsewhere. Taking a deep breath, she opened her messages and typed out a quick text to Titi. What did that kiss mean for us? And what about your husband? She watched as the message marked read, her heart thudding as she waited for a reply. Nothing. After a minute of silence, she dialed Titi's number, but the call was declined almost immediately. Ebere sighed deeply, sinking back into her pillow, feeling a familiar ache as she thought about Ebuka waiting for her message. Suddenly, the way she had just ignored him felt like how Titi was treating her. The next day, after a long and restless night, Ebere went through her classes in a daze. She was gathering her books in the art room, about to leave, when she saw Titi standing in the doorway, her eyes fixed intently on Ebere. "Hey," Titi said softly, her voice warm and inviting. Ebere felt her heart leap. "Hey, I wasn't sure if..." Titi reached out, gently holding her hand. "Come on, let's go." Ebere found herself in Titi's car, the city blurring past the windows as they drove in silence, an electric tension filling the air. When they arrived at Titi's home, neither of them wasted any time. As soon as the door clicked shut, Titi pulled her close, her kiss deep and fierce, and Ebere melted into her arms, letting everything else fade away. Afterward, they lay tangled together, the room quiet except for the soft sound of their breathing. Ebere propped herself up, studying Titi's face. There were so many questions still spinning in her mind. "Tell me about your husband," she asked softly. "I noticed you don't have any pictures of him around." Titi's eyes glinted with a faint smile, as if amused by the question. "How old do you think I am?" she asked, a playful tone in her voice. Ebere blinked, taken aback by the question. Um, well, I'm 23, so I'd say 28, maybe. Titi chuckled, shaking her head. "I'm actually 34, she said, watching Ebere's reaction. "I've been married for 12 years. "Wow," Ebere murmured, surprised. "And you have a kid?" "Mm-hmm," Titi nodded, smiling softly. "A boy, 11 years old. He lives with his father in the capital city." Ebere managed a smile, but there was a growing ache in her chest. "Why don't you ever talk about him? Or why aren't you two living together?" Titi shrugged, her eyes turning distant. "Work brought me here. I go back from time to time to see him and Junior." The answer felt a little too smooth, and Ebere's curiosity deepened. She swallowed, gathering her courage. "Do you love him?" Titi's eyes held hers for a moment before she let out a quiet laugh. "Love? I'm not sure about that, but he's a good husband and a good father to Junior. That's enough, right?" Ebere's heart pounded as she considered the weight of those words, wondering where she stood in this tangled web. "Then, what about us?" she asked, her voice trembling just slightly. Titi reached out, gently cupping Ebere's face. "I like you," she murmured, her eyes warm and steady. "And I can see you like me too. We could keep seeing each other like this, you know, once in a while." Ebere opened her mouth to respond, to ask more, but Titi gently pressed a finger to her lips. "Baby girl, enough of the questions. Let's just enjoy our time, eh?" Before Ebere could say anything more, Titi leaned in, capturing her lips in another kiss, silencing her questions and pulling her back into the haze of the moment, where everything else seemed to fade away.